The morning fog hung thick over the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado as Commander Jake Matthews poured his third cup of coffee. Now, before we reveal the full story. First, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. 22 years in the Navy. 15 of them with the SEALs, and he thought he'd seen everything. The notification on his secure tablet made him pause mid-sip. No name attached to the file. Just a series of clearance codes he'd never seen before, each one higher than his own. "Sir, we have a situation at the main gate," his radio crackled. It was Petty Officer Rodriguez, a man who didn't rattle easily. Jake grabbed his cap and headed out. The fog was lifting now, revealing the obstacle course where his newest class of SEAL candidates were running drills. These were hard men, selected from thousands of applicants, each one believing they were the toughest person alive. They had to believe that to survive the training. At the gate, 3 armed guards stood at awkward attention. A black SUV with government plates sat idling. The rear door opened, and she stepped out. She couldn't have been more than 5'6", dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Athletic build, but nothing intimidating about her frame. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a dark jacket, with a small duffel bag over her shoulder. She looked like she could be someone's sister visiting for the weekend. What happened next made Jake's coffee go cold in his hands. Master Chief Derek Stone was walking past the gate, heading to the armory. Stone was a legend. 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, and a man who once carried a wounded teammate 12 miles through enemy territory. He had a 1,000-yard stare that made grown men nervous. Stone never showed deference to anyone except the flag. He spotted the woman. His entire body went rigid. Came to attention and rendered a salute so crisp it could have been textbook. The woman gave a slight nod. Stone held the salute until she passed, then dropped it and continued walking, his face unreadable. Jake felt his pulse quicken. He approached the gate commander. "Who is she?" The gate commander, a seasoned chief with 20 years in, looked pale. "Sir, I don't know. Her credentials are... I've never seen anything like them." The computer cleared her before I could even finish the scan. Every alarm should have gone off with those clearance levels, but instead, we just got a green light and a message that said full access. No restrictions. Jake watched as she walked onto the base like she owned it. Not arrogant. Just certain. Like gravity or the sunrise. Just a fact of nature. Jake asked.
Us.
"Building 7, sir." The classified briefing rooms. Jake's mind raced. Building 7 was where they planned sensitive operations, where they debriefed operators who'd seen things the public would never know about. He pulled out his phone and called his commanding officer, Captain Richards. "Sir, we have an unidentified woman on base with clearances above my pay grade. Did you authorize this?" There was a long pause. "Jake, I received a call from the Pentagon 2 hours ago. I was told to extend every courtesy and ask no questions. Whatever this is, it's coming from very high up. Way above me. Way above you." Jake hung up and started following her at a distance. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of serious training, not the swagger of someone trying to prove themselves, but the efficiency of someone who had nothing left to prove. As she crossed the parade ground, more SEALs spotted her. Lieutenant Commander Frank Carson, a man who'd led raids in 3 different countries, stiffened and nodded respectfully. Chief Petty Officer Miguel Santos, who'd survived a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, actually stepped aside to let her pass, his eyes tracking her with something that looked like recognition, though Jake knew that was impossible. The SEAL candidates. Running the obstacle course started to notice the reactions of their instructors. The training stopped. 200 of the hardest men in the military stood watching as this unknown woman walked across their base, and their heroes men they'd idolized. Men they wanted to become, well, reacted the same way. Respect, immediate and absolute. Jake caught up with Chief Stone near the armory. Derek, who was that? Stone's jaw tightened. Can't say, sir. Can't or won't? Both. Stone's voice was flat. But I'll tell you this much. If she's here, something significant is about to happen. Something that matters? You've worked with her before? Stone's eyes fixed on some distant point. I've never met her, Commander. But I know what she represents. Leave it at that. Jake felt frustration building. In the SEALs, you trusted your teammates with your life. Secrets could get people killed. But he also knew when to push and when to stand down. Stone's tone told him this was the latter. By noon, the entire base was buzzing. The woman had been seen entering 3 different secure facilities. Each time the doors opened without her having to show credentials. Each time senior officers who happened to be present went still and quiet. Jake finally got his chance to approach her in the late afternoon. She was standing alone near the beach, looking out at the ocean. The sun was starting to lower, casting orange light across the water. Ma'am, I'm Commander Matthews. I run the training program here. I think there's been some confusion about your clearance protocol. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were striking. Not because of their color, but because of what they held. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of men who'd been in situations where death was a close companion. Combat eyes. Something older and deeper. There's no confusion, Commander, she said. Her voice was calm, measured. I'm exactly where I need to be. I don't even know your name. You don't need to. With respect, ma'am, this is a secure facility. I have protocols to follow. She smiled slightly. It wasn't condescending, but it made him feel like a child asking why the sky was blue. Your protocols have already been followed, by people far above your command structure. I'm not here to disrupt your training, Commander. I'm here to evaluate something. Evaluate what? Whether your men are ready for what's coming? The way she said it made his skin prickle. And what exactly is coming? That's not something I can discuss. But I'll give you this. In 3 days, I'll be running a special training exercise. I'll need 12 of your best operators. Not your biggest or your strongest. Your smartest. The ones who can think when everything goes wrong? Jake felt himself bristling. My men are all capable of. I'm sure they are, she interrupted gently. But I need specific people. I'll observe your training tomorrow and select them myself. You'll receive orders from the Pentagon confirming this by tonight, and if I refuse to cooperate. She looked at him for a long moment. You won't, because you're a good officer and you understand that sometimes the mission is bigger than your need to understand it. She was right, and he hated that. But there was something about her that made him trust her despite every instinct screaming that this situation was wrong. Can you at least tell me where you trained? Your background? No. Are you special activities? CIA DIA? Some new program I haven't heard of? Commander, I don't exist in any database you have access to. I have no service record you can find, no name you can look up, no past you can verify. But when your Master Chief saluted me this morning, it wasn't because he was confused or following protocol. It was because he understood something that you're still trying to figure out. And what's that? That some battles are fought in the shadows by people who can never step into the light. That some operations require people who can be completely forgotten, completely erased if things go wrong. Your SEALs are the tip of the spear, Commander. They're the best of the best. But there are things beyond even them. Darker things. More necessary things. Jake felt cold despite the warm California evening. You're talking about deniable operations. Black ops beyond black. I'm not talking about anything, she said. I'm just a consultant here to observe your training. That's all that will ever be written in any report. But yes, Commander, you're beginning to understand. That night, Jake sat in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The orders from the Pentagon had come through exactly as she'd said. They were brief and absolute. Extend full cooperation. Provide requested personnel. Ask no questions. Signed by a general whose name Jake barely recognized, but whose rank was high enough to end careers. His computer pinged. A secure message, but from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it. Commander Matthews. You're wondering if you can trust me. You're wondering if your men will be safe. I can't promise safety. This life doesn't offer that. But I can tell you that what I'm training them for could save thousands of lives. Maybe more. You've trained warriors. Now I'll show them what it means to be ghosts. Watch tomorrow. You'll understand more than I can say. And Commander? The real kind. The kind nobody thanks you for because they never know it happened. The message disappeared 30 seconds after he read it, erasing itself from his system completely. Jake looked out his window at the base below. Lights dotted the buildings where his men were sleeping, recovering from another brutal day of training. Good men, the best America could produce. And tomorrow, some of them would meet a woman with no name, no records, and no past. A woman who made hardened warriors salute on instinct. A woman who might be exactly what the country needed, or its most dangerous secret. He wouldn't sleep much tonight. But then again, he hadn't expected to. The next morning arrived with a blood-red sunrise. Jake had managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, his mind racing with questions that had no answers. He arrived at the training grounds before dawn to find she was already there. Somehow, she looked more dangerous in simple clothes than most operators looked in full combat gear. Commander, she greeted him with a nod. Your men start at 0530, correct? That's right. Live fire exercises followed by close quarters combat drills? Good, I want to see them under stress. Not just physical stress, mental. At precisely 5:30, the operators began arriving. These weren't fresh recruits. These were fully qualified SEALs, men who'd already survived the infamous Hell Week, men who'd seen combat. Marcus Webb was the first to notice her. Webb was a team leader, 32 years old, with sharp eyes and a reputation for staying calm when operations went sideways. He glanced at her, then did a double-take. Jake watched as Webb's posture changed subtly. The lieutenant had seen something in that brief moment, recognized something that made him wary. The morning exercises began. The woman watched in silence, taking notes in a small leather notebook. Not on a tablet or computer, but actual paper. Old school, untraceable. The live fire course was brutal. Operators had to navigate through a maze of structures while engaging pop-up targets, all while carrying 60 pounds of gear in the climbing heat. She watched each man carefully, but Jake noticed she wasn't paying attention to who shot fastest or most accurately. She was watching how they moved when they thought no one was looking, how they checked corners, how they communicated with hand signals. The tiny things that revealed character under pressure. After 2 hours, she spoke to Jake. That one. She pointed to a younger operator, Petty Officer Second Class David Chen. He rechecks every clearing twice, even when he's certain it's secure. That's not paranoia. That's discipline. Chen's solid, Jake confirmed. Former Marine Recon, before he went SEAL. That one. She indicated Lieutenant Webb. He modified his approach on the third structure, adapted his tactics based on what he learned from the first two. Quick learner, Webb's one of our best. And him. She nodded toward a massive operator named Thomas Riley. Riley was 6'4", was built like a tank, with hands that could crush walnuts. He's not just using strength. Watch how he positions himself. He's always thinking about fields of fire, about protecting his team's flanks. He thinks like a protector, not a warrior. Jake had trained hundreds of men, but she was seeing things in minutes that took him weeks to identify. It was unsettling. The close-quarters combat drills started after a brief break. The operators paired off in the kill house, a specially designed building filled with rooms, where they practiced clearing spaces and engaging hostile targets at close range. This was where hesitation got you killed. This was where instinct had to be faster than thought. She stood at the observation point, watching through the ballistic glass. Jake stood beside her. "Commander, can I ask you something?" she said, not taking her eyes off the action below. "Depends on the question. Why do you do this?" Train these men to go into the darkest places on earth? Jake thought about it. Because someone has to. Because evil doesn't stop itself? That's the right answer? She made another note, but it's not complete. You do it because you understand that the cost of freedom is constant vigilance. That peace is maintained by people willing to walk into hell so others don't have to. Is that why you do what you do? She finally looked at him. I do what I do because I learned a long time ago that there are threats most people can't even imagine. Threats that would make your SEAL operations look like training exercises. And someone has to stand between those threats and the innocent. You talk like you've seen something. Something specific. I've seen many things, Commander. Things I can never speak about. Things that would destroy the lives of everyone I told. She turned back to the window. That's the real price of this work. Not the danger. Not the injuries or the sleepless nights. It's the isolation. It's knowing things you can never share, carrying burdens you can never put down. Below, the drill was going wrong. One team had encountered a scenario where a hostage appeared to be wired with explosives. The team leader froze for 3 crucial seconds. Trying to decide whether to engage or withdraw, she pressed the intercom button. Reset the scenario. The surprised safety officer looked up at the observation deck. Ma'am, I don't reset it. Run it again with the same team. Jake nodded to the officer. The scenario reset. This time, the team leader made a different choice, faster and more decisive. Not necessarily the right choice, but a choice made without the paralysis of overthinking. Better, she muttered. Fear is acceptable. Freezing is not. Jake looked at the list she'd compiled and felt a chill. Every single one of them was someone he would have chosen himself for a critical mission. She'd selected the absolute best, not through weeks of evaluation, but through hours of observation. These men, she said, handing him the list, tomorrow morning, 0400, full combat loadout. They're to tell no one where they're going or what they're doing. Not their teammates, not their families. As far as anyone knows, they're doing routine training. Where are you taking them? Somewhere they've never been. Somewhere that will test whether they're ready for the kind of operations most people don't believe exist. That night, Jake called the 12 operators into a briefing room. They filed in, curious and confused. These were men who jumped out of perfectly good airplanes, swum through freezing oceans, and kicked down doors in hostile countries. But right now, they looked uncertain. Gentlemen, Jake began. Tomorrow, you're going to participate in a special training exercise. I can't tell you what it involves, because I don't know. What I can tell you is that this comes from the highest levels of command, and the woman running it has credentials that made the Pentagon jump. Lieutenant Webb raised his hand. Sir, who is she? I don't know, Lieutenant. I genuinely don't know. But you trust her? This from Chen, the former Marine. Jake paused. Did he trust her? He'd known her for less than 24 hours. She'd told him nothing concrete. She had no verifiable background. But there was something about her, something in the way seasoned operators reacted to her presence. I trust that she knows things we don't, Jake said carefully. And I trust that whatever she's preparing you for is important. Important enough that people way above my head think it's worth doing? Riley, the big operator, spoke up in his deep voice. Sir, are we going combat? I don't know, Chief. I honestly don't know. But I want you all to treat this like it's real. Whatever she asks you to do, whatever she shows you, take it seriously. These aren't games we play. The men nodded. They'd all volunteered for dangerous duty. They'd all signed up for a life where orders sometimes came without explanations. After they filed out, Jake found her waiting in the hallway outside his office. How long had she been standing there? How much had she heard? They're good men, she said. You've trained them well. They deserve to know what they're walking into. No, Commander, they don't. Because if they knew, some of them would back out. Not from cowardice, but from good sense. What I'm going to show them exists in a space between legal and illegal, between moral and necessary. It's the kind of work that keeps democracy intact, but could never survive democratic scrutiny. You're talking about assassination. Black bag operations. The kind of things we're not supposed to do. I'm talking about survival. When a terrorist is planning to release a biological weapon in a crowded city, do you wait for a warrant? When a rogue state is about to launch a cyber attic that could cripple our power grid, do you convene a committee? There are people in the shadows fighting a war that never makes the news. Your men are about to learn if they have what it takes to join that fight. Jake felt anger rising. These men are warriors, not criminals. I know the difference, Commander. Criminals hurt people for personal gain. But there's a third category. Ghosts. People who do terrible things to prevent worse things. People who sacrifice not just their lives but their souls for the greater good. Not everyone is suited for that. Not everyone should be, and you are. She smiled sadly. I stopped being suited for normal life a long time ago. I'm a weapon commander. A very precise, very carefully controlled weapon. But a weapon nonetheless. She walked away, leaving Jake standing in the empty hallway. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the ocean waves hitting the beach. Constant, eternal, indifferent to human struggles. He went back to his office and pulled out a bottle of bourbon he kept in his desk for nights when the weight of command felt too heavy. He poured 2 fingers and sat in the darkness, thinking about the men he'd just sent into the unknown. The best warriors America had. But were they ready to become something more? Something darker and more necessary? Tomorrow would tell. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They'll be safe, Commander. I promise you that. I don't waste good men, but they'll never be the same. Sleep well. He didn't touch the bourbon. He needed to be sharp tomorrow. Needed to be ready for whatever was coming. Outside, the base was quiet. 200 warriors slept, preparing their bodies and minds for another day of pushing human limits. But 12 of them would wake to something different. 12 of them would step through a door that, once opened, could never be closed again. And the woman with no name, no records, and no past would be the one holding that door open, waiting to see who was brave enough or foolish enough to walk through. 0400 came too quickly. The 12 operators assembled in the dark, their breath visible in the cold morning air. They wore full tactical gear, weapons loaded, ready for anything. Or so they thought. She arrived in the same black SUV from 2 days ago, but this time she wasn't alone. 2 men stepped out with her, both wearing dark suits and sunglasses, despite the pre-dawn darkness. They looked like Secret Service, but their bearing suggested something more specialized. They took up positions near the vehicle and didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched. She'd changed her appearance slightly. Her hair was now concealed under a black cap, and she wore tactical gear that was expensive and unmarked. No flags, no unit patches, no identifying marks of any kind. Ghost gear for a ghost operator. Gentlemen, she addressed the 12 men. Her voice carried authority that had nothing to do with volume. What you're about to experience is classified at the highest levels. You will not speak of it to anyone. Not your commanding officers, not your teammates, not your families. When this exercise is over, it will have never happened. Is that understood? 12 voices answered in unison. Yes, ma'am. Good. Load into the vehicles. 3 black vans had appeared as if from nowhere. The operators divided themselves and climbed in. Jake watched from a distance, having been explicitly told he was not invited to this particular party. The convoy pulled away. Heading east into the desert. The operators sat in silence, each man processing what was happening in his own way. Lieutenant Webb kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing. He'd done black operations before, missions that never appeared in any official record. But this felt different. More secretive. More dangerous. Chen, the former Marine, sat with his eyes closed, breathing steadily. He'd learned long ago that you conserved energy when you could, because you never knew when you'd need it. Riley, the massive operator. Watch the woman through the partition separating the cargo area from the driver's compartment. She sat in the front passenger seat, completely still, occasionally speaking into a phone in a language he didn't recognize. They finally stopped at what appeared to be an abandoned military facility deep in the Nevada desert. The buildings were weathered and old, probably dating back to the Cold War. But as they exited the vans, the operators noticed details that didn't fit. New cameras, carefully hidden. Fresh tire tracks leading to what should have been a forgotten installation. This place was abandoned in name only. She led them into the largest building. Inside, it had been completely renovated. High-tech equipment lined the walls. Multiple computer workstations. A large screen that currently displayed a satellite image of somewhere foreign, somewhere urban, and crowded. "Welcome to nowhere," she said, turning to face them. The land is owned by a shell corporation that's buried under 6 layers of other shell corporations. If something goes wrong here, no one will come looking for you. No one will rescue you. You will simply disappear. The operators exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they'd encountered before. "Now," she continued, "I'm going to tell you about a problem. 3 weeks ago, intelligence assets identified a cell operating in Eastern Europe. This cell has acquired a biological agent, something developed during the Soviet era and thought to have been destroyed. They plan to release it in a Western city. The death toll would be catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands within the first week. Millions if it spreads." She clicked a remote, and the screen changed to show surveillance photos of several men. "These are the principals. The man on the left is Dmitry Volkov, former Russian military intelligence. The one next to him is Hassan Arushid, a biochemist who went off the grid 5 years ago. Together they've created a nightmare scenario." Webb raised his hand. "Ma'am, why are you telling us this? This sounds like a job for CIA or State Department, because CIA can't touch this. State Department can't touch this. This operation exists in a legal gray area, so dark that it's essentially black. These men are in a country where we have no jurisdiction. Any official action would create an international incident. It could spark a conflict we're not ready for." "So what's the solution?" Chen asked. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "The solution is people like me, and potentially people like you. We go in quietly. We eliminate the threat. We leave no trace. And the world never knows how close it came to disaster." Riley spoke up, his voice skeptical. "You're talking about assassination on foreign soil without authorization. Talking about saving lives. Lots of lives. But yes, to do that, we sometimes have to take lives in ways that would never survive a congressional hearing." Revealing weapons the operators had never seen before. Prototype firearms, suppressed to a degree that shouldn't be possible. Equipment that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. "This is the cutting edge," she said. "Technology that won't be available to regular special operations units for another decade. We get it first because we need it first. Because we operate where failure isn't just unacceptable, it's catastrophic." For the next 6 hours, she'll put them through scenarios. Not physical training, but mental. She presented them with impossible situations. A target surrounded by civilians. A bomb that couldn't be defused, but could be moved. A hostage situation where saving lives meant crossing legal and moral lines. With each scenario, operators began to understand what she was really testing. Their ability to make hard choices, their capacity to live with consequences that would haunt them forever. Some of the men struggled. Petty Officer Marcus Grant, an operator with 2 kids at home, couldn't justify certain actions, no matter how many lives were at stake. She didn't criticize him. She just nodded and moved on. Others adapted quickly. Webb approached each problem like a chess match, finding solutions that minimized harm while accomplishing the objective. Chen drew on his Marine training, remembering that sometimes the right choice was the one you could live with, not the one that looked heroic. Riley surprised everyone. The big man, who seemed built for brute force, showed a nuanced understanding of proportional response. He knew when overwhelming violence was necessary and when a lighter touch would work better. As evening approached, the operators gathered outside, standing in the desert heat, processing what they'd experienced. "This is heavy," Grant said quietly. "This is stuff that keeps you up at night."
"This is the point," Webb replied.
"She's finding out who can carry that weight." Inside, she watched them through a window. One of her suit-wearing companions approached. "What do you think?" "I think 3 of them have what it takes," she said. "Maybe 4. The rest are excellent operators, but they're not ready for this level of work." "And you don't." "I believe in survival. I believe in protecting innocent people by any means necessary. Lines are luxuries for people who don't have to make impossible choices." She paired them off and gave them a real scenario. "Intelligence just confirmed that Volkov and his team are meeting in 72 hours. You have 3 days to plan an operation to eliminate the threat. No restrictions. No oversight. Just results. Work in your pairs and present your plans." The operators dove into the challenge. They studied maps, analyzed satellite imagery, considered approaches and exfiltration routes. She moved between the groups, asking questions that exposed weaknesses in their thinking. "What happens if there are children present?" she asked Webb and Chen. "We adapt," Webb said. "Choose a different location or different timing." "What if you don't have that luxury? What if this is your only window?" Chen answered slowly. "Then we take the shot anyway. We save thousands by sacrificing the comfort of our conscience." She nodded. "That's the reality. That's the burden. Can you live with that?" "I don't know," Chen admitted. "But I'd rather struggle with that than with the knowledge that I'd let thousands die because I wasn't willing to make a hard call." By nightfall, the presentations began. Each pair laid out their operational plan. Others were ruthlessly efficient, accepting that innocent people might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. She listened to each presentation without expression. "You've all done well," she said. "You've shown me tactical thinking and creative problem solving. But now, I'm going to tell you something that changes everything. There is no biological weapon. There is no Volkov. There is no terrorist cell." The operator stared at her in shocked silence. "This was a test," she continued. "Not of your skills, but of your character. I needed to know how far you'd go, what lines you'd cross, what moral compromises you'd make when you believed lives were at stake." Riley stood up, anger flashing across his face. "You lied to us." "Yes, because that's what this work requires. Deception, manipulation, using whatever tools necessary to accomplish the mission. If you can't handle being lied to by an ally, how will you handle the deceptions of an enemy?" "What's the real mission?" Webb asked. "There is no mission. But when there is, when the country faces a threat that requires people willing to work in the shadows, is willing to sacrifice everything, including their honor, I'll know who to call. Some of you passed that test. Some of you didn't. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant for this life." She walked to the door, then paused. "You'll be returned to base. Tomorrow, this day, will have never happened. But remember what you learned about yourselves. Remember what you're capable of, for better or worse. And remember that somewhere out there, people are fighting battles you'll never hear about. People who gave up their names, their pasts, their futures, to keep you safe." The ride back was silent. Each man was lost in his own thoughts, processing what had happened. They'd been tested in ways they never expected, pushed to examine parts of themselves they'd rather not acknowledge. Jake was waiting when they returned at 0 to 100. The men filed past him, exhausted, and changed in ways he couldn't quite identify. She exited last. "How did it go?" "As expected. You train good men, Commander?" "I found a few great ones. Will I see you again?" "Probably not. My work takes me places most people don't go. But know this, your men are ready. If the worst happens, if the country needs warriors willing to step beyond the light, you've prepared them well." She climbed into the SUV, and it disappeared into the darkness, leaving Jake standing alone in the quiet base. Wondering what his men had seen and what price they'd paid for seeing it, 6 months passed before Jake saw her again. Life at the training center returned to its normal rhythm of controlled chaos. The 12 operators who'd participated in the mystery exercise never spoke about it, not even among themselves. It was as if those 24 hours had been erased from existence. But Jake noticed changes. Webb moved through training with a new intensity, as if every exercise was preparation for something larger. Chen had become quieter, more introspective. Even Riley, usually jovial, despite his intimidating size, carried himself with a heavier gravity. The world outside continued spinning. News reports covered terrorist attacks, political conflicts, cyber warfare, the usual chaos that required constant vigilance. Jake wondered how many of those stories had shadows behind them, operations that would never see daylight, carried out by people who didn't exist. Then, on a Tuesday morning in autumn, she walked back onto the base. This time, there was no mystery. She arrived with proper credentials, a full team, and an official mission briefing. Jake was summoned to a secure conference room where she sat with Captain Richards and 2 civilians who had intelligence community written all over them. "Commander Matthews," she greeted him. She looked exactly the same, as if 6 months hadn't passed at all. "Thank you for joining us." "I wasn't aware I had a choice," Jake replied, taking a seat. Captain Richards cleared his throat. "Commander, what we're about to discuss is classified at the highest levels. What you learn in this room stays in this room." One of the civilians opened a laptop and turned it toward Jake. The screen showed surveillance. Footage of a compound somewhere arid and mountainous. 4 days ago, the civilian said, "We intercepted communications indicating an imminent attack on a U.S. embassy. The threat is credible and specific. The problem is, the people planning this attack are in a region where we officially have no presence." Jake studied the footage. "Correct," the woman said. "We need a team to go in, neutralize the threat, and extract before anyone knows we were there. This is precisely the kind of operation I was evaluating your men 6 months ago. You want to use my operators for an illegal mission? I want to use volunteers for a necessary mission," she corrected. "Everything will be deniable. If anything goes wrong, the United States government will claim no knowledge. Your men will be on their own. These aren't disposable assets. These are warriors who've sworn an oath to defend the country. And that's exactly what they'll be doing," she said quietly. "Commander, I understand your resistance. I respect it. But let me be very clear. If we don't act, American diplomats will die. Good people doing important work will be killed because we were afraid to cross lines drawn by politicians who've never had to make life or death decisions." Captain Richards leaned forward. "Jake, I've seen the intelligence. This is legitimate. The threat is real. And while I don't like the methods, I like the alternative even less." Jake sat back, his mind racing. He'd spent his career training men for combat, but always within the framework of law and international norms. What she was proposing was different. It was operating in the shadows, becoming the very thing they were supposed to fight against. Except they'd be doing it for the right reasons. Who would go? He asked. "That's up to you and them," she said. "I need 6 operators. They have to volunteer. No pressure, no coercion. They need to understand what they're signing up for and choose it anyway, and you'll be leading them. Every step of the way. I don't send people where I won't go myself." Jake looked at her for a long moment. He still didn't know her name, her background, or really anything concrete about her, but he'd watched her interact with his men. He'd seen how seasoned warriors reacted to her presence, and he'd received one piece of information that changed everything. Master Chief Stone had pulled him aside 2 weeks ago. The old SEAL had been drunk, something Jake had never seen before. Stone had looked at him with haunted eyes and said, "That woman from 6 months ago. I did some digging. Called in favors with people who owe me. No one knows who she is, but everyone knows what she is. She's a legend in the Black Ops community. They call her the Wraith. She's been in every major shadow operation for the last decade. Syria, Ukraine, North Korea, Iran. Places where one wrong move means war. And she's never failed. Never lost a team member. If she's recruiting from here, it means she trusts these men with her life. Now, looking at the wraith across the conference table, Jake understood the weight of that trust. "I'll talk to them," he said, "but the choice is theirs." He gathered the 12 operators who'd trained with her 6 months ago. They assembled in a room at dusk, the golden light streaming through windows, highlighting the dust motes floating in the air. "Gentlemen," Jake began, "I'm going to tell you about an opportunity. It's voluntary, it's dangerous, and if you accept it, you'll be operating outside normal legal boundaries. You'll have no official support." He laid out the mission in broad strokes, omitting specific operational details but giving them enough to understand the stakes. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Webb spoke up. "Is she leading it?" "Yes, then I'm in." Chen nodded. "Me too." "Count me in, sir." One by one, 8 of the 12 volunteered. 4 declined, and Jake respected them for knowing their limits. Those 4 would continue to be excellent SEALs, serving their country in traditional ways. But the 8 who volunteered were stepping into something darker. The woman arrived that evening to meet with her team. She'd set up a tactical operations center in one of the secure buildings, with maps, satellite feeds, and equipment that Jake had never seen before. "Thank you all for volunteering," she said to the assembled operators. "What we're about to do is important. More important than any single mission you've been on. We're going to save lives by taking lives. We're going to prevent a tragedy by becoming something tragic ourselves." She walked them through the operation. The target was a compound in the mountains along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Intelligence indicated that 6 high-value individuals were meeting there in 72 hours to finalize plans for the embassy attack. The team would insert by helicopter, neutralize the targets, and extract before local military forces could respond. "This isn't a capture mission," she made clear. "We're not taking prisoners. We're not gathering evidence." Lieutenant Webb asked the question on everyone's mind. "What if there are non-combatants present?" "We avoid civilian casualties whenever possible," she said. "But our primary objective is to stop this attack. If innocent people are in the compound, we'll do everything we can to protect them. But if we have to choose between their lives and the lives of the 200 people working at that embassy, we choose the 200. It was a cold calculus, the kind that kept people awake at night. But it was also honest. No false promises, no comfortable lies. They trained for 48 hours straight. She pushed them harder than they'd ever been pushed before, running the operation over and over until every movement was instinctive. She taught them techniques that weren't in any manual, methods developed through years of shadow warfare. Jake watched from a distance, seeing his men transform. They were becoming something more than soldiers. They were becoming ghosts. The night before the mission, she found Jake standing outside the operations center, looking up at the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Thinking about what I'm sending them into." "You're not sending them anywhere, Commander." "Or did you manipulate them into choosing it?" She was quiet for a moment. "That's a fair question. Yes, I influenced them. I showed them a path and made it appealing. But ultimately, they walked that path themselves." "No one forced them? How do you live with it?" Jake asked. "How do you do what you do and still sleep at night?" "Who says I sleep?" She smiled sadly. "Commander, I gave up a normal life a long time ago. I gave up relationships, a family, a home, all the things that make life worth living. What I got in return was the ability to make a difference. A real difference. I've stopped attacks that would have killed thousands. I've eliminated threats that would have started wars. And yes, I've done terrible things to accomplish that. Things that haunt me. Things I'll answer for someday. Do you regret it?" "Every day, but I do it all again because the alternative is worse. Innocence is a luxury, Commander. Some of us have to give up that luxury so others can keep it." The next morning, the team loaded into a modified helicopter at a private airstrip 50 miles from the base. The aircraft had no markings, no identification. It didn't exist in any official registry. Jake shook hands with each operator. Webb, Chen, Riley, and 5 others. Good men. The best men. Walking into the darkness because someone had to. She was the last to board. She paused at the door and looked back at Jake. They'll come home, Commander. I promise you that. How can you promise something like that? Because I never leave anyone behind. That's not bravado. That's a fact. In 10 years of doing this work, I've never lost a team member. I don't plan to start now. The helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the pre-dawn sky. Jake stood watching until it was gone, then walked back to his office. He wouldn't sleep for the next 48 hours. Couldn't sleep. Not while his men were out there. Time moved strangely. He went through the motions of his day, conducting training, reviewing reports, maintaining the normal rhythms of command. But his mind was elsewhere, tracking the hours, imagining what was happening thousands of miles away. The operation was planned for a 24-hour window. Insert at dusk, hit the compound at night, extract by dawn. Simple in theory, impossibly complex in execution. 47 hours after they left, Jake's secure phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. Commander Matthews. Her voice was tired but steady. Package delivered. All personnel accounted for. Mission accomplished. Jake felt tension he didn't know he was holding release from his shoulders. Casualties. None on our side. Target compound neutralized. Embassy attack prevented. Official channels will report that the individuals died in an accidental explosion, a gas leak in their compound. Tragic, but not suspicious. When will they be back? 72 hours. They'll need debriefing and medical evaluation. There was a pause. I'll be moving to the next operation. There's always a next operation. Will I see you again? Probably not, Commander. But your men did exceptional work. They saved lives tonight. A lot of lives. They should be proud, even if they can never speak about it. 3 days later, the 8 operators returned. They looked exhausted, older somehow, as if they'd aged years in a few days. Jake met them privately, away from the rest of the base. How are you holding up? He asked. Webb answered for the group. We're good, sir. Mission was successful. No complications. But Jake could see it in their eyes. The weight of what they'd done. The knowledge that they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. They'd killed people, bad people, dangerous people. They'd become exactly what she'd trained them to be. Ghosts. Warriors of the shadows. Protectors who operated beyond the light. You did good work, Jake said quietly. You saved lives. Remember that when the doubts come, and they will come. Late at night when you're alone with your thoughts, you'll question what you did. But know this, you made the hard choice, the right choice, and the world is safer because of it. Over the following weeks, Jake watched his operators reintegrate into normal SEAL operations. On the surface, they were the same men. But beneath, they carried secrets that isolated them. They'd seen behind the curtain, understood how the world really worked, and they could never go back to innocent ignorance. Sometimes late at night, Jake would wonder about her, the Wraith. The woman with no name, no records, no past. Was she on another mission? Training another team? Or was she somewhere quiet, trying to find moments of peace in a life dedicated to darkness? He'd never know. She'd disappeared back into the shadows where she belonged. But the lesson remained. There were warriors who fought in the light, celebrated and honored, and there were warriors who fought in the darkness, unknown and unremembered. Both were necessary. Both paid a price. The difference was that one group got parades and medals, while the other got only the cold comfort of knowing they'd done what needed to be done. Jake looked out over the training grounds where a new class of SEAL candidates was running obstacle courses, pushing themselves to become elite warriors. They were chasing glory, honor, and purpose. They were chasing the dream of becoming heroes. But Jake knew the truth now. The real heroes weren't the ones who got their names in newspapers or their faces on television. The real heroes were the ones who gave up their names entirely. The ones who sacrificed not just their lives, but their very identity for something larger than themselves. She'd shown him that truth. The woman with no name, no records, no past. She'd shown him that sometimes the greatest act of service was to become nothing, so that others could remain everything. And somewhere out there, in some dark corner of the world, she was doing it again. Fighting battles no one would ever hear about. Saving lives that would never know they'd been in danger. Walking through hell so that others could live in peace. That was her burden. That was her purpose. That was the price of being a ghost. And Jake understood now why every SEAL had snapped to attention when she walked in. Not because of her rank or her credentials, but because they recognized, on some instinctive level, what she represented. The ultimate warrior. The ultimate sacrifice. The person willing to give up everything, even recognition for giving it up, to protect the innocent. She was what they all aspired to be, even if they didn't consciously realize it. She was the standard, the ideal, the impossible goal. She was the ghost that protected the living, and the world was safer because she existed. You would if the world would never know her name. Thanks for watching video. If you like this story, please hit subscribe button. Thank you so much.